The silence of God. In any interaction between two persons, including one divine and the other human, one must remain silent to be able to listen to the other. About this interaction, St. John of the Cross in 1618, in his book Ascent of Mount Carmel, affirmed, "For a person to speak, it is necessary that the other keep silence. It is impossible for two people to speak at once. In it lies the silence of God, in that, although inflamed by the desire to feel His presence and listen to Him, we are not willing to keep the necessary silence in a world where the noise is constant, and not having been educated for silence, we receive the impression that despite our honest aspiration, God is silent. However, God in His silence wants to keep and help us renounce our self-sufficiency. So we, when in silence, stop hiding before God. Deus. Although it is arguable, Xu Li in 2016 of the University of Sydney has estimated that around 6 billion people on our planet believe in the existence of a superior being from whom all creation originated. According to her numbers, the rest of the world population is composed of atheists, seculars, agnostics, and people who do not profess any religion, among whom believers can also be found. Through his history on our planet, humanity has received various revelations through a select group of people who have managed to become receptive to the presence of God, and around which some religions have been formed. Most people who believe in God have not seen or spoken to Him, since God remains invisible to our physical senses. However, they still believe in Him, partly because they have been nourished by the revelations transmitted by different world religions about His existence, and partly because they nourish the hope that there must be something more than this short period of time that we call life in an unjust, violent, and deranged world. For an increasingly large segment of the world population, the knowledge of God through the community intermediation of a particular system of dogmas and beliefs that does not respond to their nascent aspirations to establish a personal, intimate, and loving relationship with their Creator, which they intuit is part of their inner being, and which they should seek and find within themselves. Towards an appropriate interaction with our Creator. Firth in 1997 maintained that in order to establish an appropriate interaction with our Creator, our problem is one of attitude and commitment. Many of us want to find the internal kingdom of God, but perhaps not now, not at this moment, since we're fascinated with the illusions that our life presents us in this three-dimensional plane of existence, whose characteristics are known in the dharmic religions as samsara, or the cycle of walking without purpose, of wandering, or a mundane existence. Lopez Quintas in 1981 said that the cause of God's silence is that the divinity does not impose its existence on man. It remains outside the universe it has created, granting it certain autonomy and evolutionary creative capacity. In the creation, there is enough light for those who wish to see, and enough darkness for those who have a contrary disposition. The problem with God's silence is that we expect a personal relationship with God without being prepared. Those who have achieved it, among whom are saints, prophets, and mystics of all religions, have prepared for it through great sacrifices. Contact with God is a religious experience in the authentic sense of religare, or rebinding and uniting the person with his creator. However, to believe is not to know, as was evident during the conversations between Jesus of Nazareth and the doctors of the law that he encountered on his way. It is not possible to interact with God effectively locked in a belief system. The belief is affirmative and disbelief is negative, but in reality both are the same thing. They do not come from someone who knows from experience, from a truth seeker, since both can lead to prejudice. Are we then condemned to desolation in this exile, in this valley of tears? Not necessarily, but if we are not willing to make the effort that leads us to have the religious experience necessary to know God, we will continue walking in circles. An indication. What preparation could have had those who have managed to know God? What sacrifices did they make? In the religious iconography of Christianity, there is a painting of Jesus pointing with his fingers at his heart that is wrapped in flames and has a crown of thorns inserted in it, from which a very powerful light emanates in all directions. There are also paintings of Mary, the mother of Jesus, that show the same bleeding heart within this religious tradition. Hanuman, a mystic who is half man and half monkey, is the most ardent devotee of Lord Rama, the most important deity of Hinduism, and is presented in some paintings opening his bleeding breast that shows in his interior two deities, the Lord Rama and Princess Sita, his consort. The images speak by themselves. Personal or impersonal. All this epic is inextricably linked with the level of consciousness of each person. Let us pause for a moment and reflect on Jesus' rebuke to the high priest of the Pharisees in John 8:19, New International Version, when asked by the high priest, "Where is your Father?" Jesus answered, "You don't know me or my Father. If you knew me, you would also know my Father." It is evident that two very different levels of consciousness were facing each other. That of the high priest, guided by his reason, dominated by the ego and based on mental beliefs, and in a system of dogmas and rituals, and the other, the Spirit of Jesus, who had obtained the knowledge of God through a deep and intimate religious experience. The biblical scale of Jacob can also be interpreted as a succession of levels of consciousness. from the smallest and dominated by the ego to the highest and impersonal, where nothing becomes everything, and where when nothing is desired, everything is given. Let's consider the following. At the lowest level of consciousness, God is impersonal because our ego dominates us, while at the highest level of consciousness, that is impersonal, God is personal through our self-transcendence. Approaching God does not happen in time or space. It is rather a spiritual journey within us. When God decides to approach those who are not impersonal yet, it is because of their suffering. The impersonality that pleases God is shown in Jesus' comment in Mark 12:41-44, New International Version, about the poor widow who gives everything she has to help. Mark relates that Jesus observed the crowd depositing the money in their treasury of the temple. And Jesus said, "Truly I tell you, this poor widow has put more in the treasury than all the rest. All gave of their wealth, but she, out of her poverty, put everything, 2 very small copper coins, everything in which she had to live." Also, in Matthew 6:5, Jesus was also clear in stating that being too personal when we address God displeases Him and does not fulfill our objective of closeness to His presence. Jesus asserted, "And when you pray, do not be like the hypocrites, because they like to stand up and pray in the synagogues and on the corners of the streets to be seen by men. Truly, I tell you, they have already received their reward." The essence of God is a mystery, and a mystery cannot have a personal relationship with a human being who defines Him and speaks for Him. Buddha never denied the existence of God, nor did he affirm it. The impersonality of God protects us against idolatry until we find it within us. It is our free and voluntary distance or closeness to His presence that confers personal or impersonal characteristics on our relationship with Him at any given moment. Approaching the mystery. In our relationship with God, what is essential is a way of living and not a set of truths to believe, has said Vázquez Parada in 1959. It is our voluntary separation that prevents us from perceiving Him as a palpable presence. Guaraguao in 2013 said that in order to approach God, silence is necessary. It is necessary to be in silence and faith in a prayer of stillness, as Mother Teresa affirmed. The essential presence of God is hidden in the center of the soul, and it is accessed only through the possibility of union in loving similarity. The spiritual man begins an individual path that no longer depends on organized doctrines and religious ordinances, and seeks the Spirit of God within himself to approach Him, to know Him, and to listen to Him through faith and intimacy. Purgation and suffering, seeking to get rid of what does not bear a resemblance to Him in likeness and love. The spiritual man managed to reveal his divine presence by means of the negation of the tasteless appetites, seizures, and imperfections that overshadowing. That has been said by González Suárez in 2016. The religious man, and with greater reason the mystic, is not allowed to disperse his loving attention in various objects. He who understands that only God is, and as Saint Teresa of Jesus affirmed, God alone is enough, reserves his desire for God. The great philosopher and politician Empedocles of Agrigento, that lived between 495 and 444, affirmed that the similar is known by the similar, and that this would connect the human being with the divinity. It follows that the carnal man has no capacity to understand spiritual matters, in the same way that for the spiritual man the cares and joys of the carnal man are no more than trifles, for which all perfection is lost. The only possibility of accessing the presence of God is through loving similarity, and St. John of the Cross in 1618, in Ascent of Mount Carmel, his second book, chapter 5, expressed that it will be called union of similarity when the two wills, is convenient to know, the one of the soul and the one of God, are in one conformed, not having in the one anything that repugn or offend to the other. For the soul to come to receive the likeness of God, there will be nothing left in it that is not the will of God. Are we willing to take the first steps? If we are not, God will always walk with us in silence.